This watch was on my recommendation list during the last AliExpress sale. Couple of things that caught my eye. First, looks like Corgeut has updated their branding, which usually is a good sign. Second, looks like they brought in some new watches in their lineup. Nothing radical, but new colors, new sizes, and yes, they also jumped on the NH34 GMT Revolution bandwagon, and I mean it in a good way. However, looks like one thing they haven't changed, and that is the price. And now I have possibly the cheapest NH34 based GMT watch here. I paid just under $85 for it, and spoiler alert, it has a feature that not all the watches double its price have. However, the eternal question is, of course, is it any good? Well, I think it's time we find out. Hello and welcome back. As I mentioned at the start, I picked this one up for $84 and at the point of making this video, Corgeut reduced the price even further to just over $83. I will leave a link in the description of this video if you want to take a closer look. In my usual format, I will go through the details and specifications of this watch and I will draw a conclusion at the end with positives and, of course, negatives, so do make sure to watch that part or just simply skip to it if you don't want to see through the whole video. The magic of YouTube technology. I should probably mention that this is my second Corgeut on the channel. The first one arrived quite a while ago and I was so impressed with it that it is still actually in my collection. I will leave a link in the description if you want to see my full review of that watch. Anyway, that Corgeut arrived in no box at all, but just in the bubble wrap. Mind you, real good quality, kind of squashy and robust bubble wrap, but bubble wrap nevertheless. So now not only do we get a new Corgeut logo, but we also get a new box and a cloth. And yeah, alright, and that's it. Well, no paperwork, possibly saving the tree, so I'll treat it as a positive. And the packaging is still a definite upgrade from a bubble wrap situation. Now, swiftly moving on to a more interesting things, let's take a look at dimensions. The case is 41mm measured across or 39.9mm if we measure the diameter of the bezel. Now, this is ever so slightly larger than the stated 39mm in the product listing. Not a big deal, but something to keep in mind. Personally, I prefer the slightly larger real diameter. I also prefer the real measurement of the case height of only 11.9mm. as opposed to 13mm stated in the product listing. A slimmer case will definitely help with better wrist fit. We have 20mm locks, the stainless steel bracelet tapers down to about 16mm at the clasp, lock tip to lock tip is 47.8mm, however, the protruding end links have a distance of 53.5mm between them. The end links do curve down and with a slim case profile should allow for a more comfortable wrist fit, which we will definitely test later in the video. The full-length bracelet should cover just about 9-inch wrist or about 23 centimeters. So good news for guys with larger wrists. And on a fully supplied stainless steel bracelet, this watch weighs 156 grams. Really good weight for a sport stainless steel watch of this style. And 147 grams after adjusting it to my about 7-inch wrist. So we have a 316L stainless steel case here. The top of the case has a fine, almost satin brushing and the flanks are mirror polished. The fixed bezel also has brushed finish on the top, which looks like a nice and consistent radial brushing. And the mirror polished side of the bezel provides a nice break between the top of the bezel and the brushing on top of the case. The bezel markings are engraved and looks like painted in black. Being engraved, they will not get rubbed off or scratched off easily. We have a screw-down crown, the crown operation is nice and smooth, no complaints here. Turning the case around and we have a simple circular brushing finish and a sterile screw-on case back. Also in the listing, Corgeut reckons that they will send a see-through back case version, unless specifically asked for a solid one. I don't see any options in the listings to choose, so I guess something you will need to clarify with the seller at the time of purchase. unless they do introduce some kind of option in the listing in the future. As I mentioned earlier, I like how slim Corgeut managed to make this case, especially taking into account that the NH34 movement that powers this watch is not the slimmest. So all in all, a pretty well put together case. However, taking into account the price point of this watch, Corgeut had to save cost somewhere. So we have a sterile crown, which is cheaper than the signed one, and then is the quality of the case finishing. And the finishing is actually pretty good, especially the brushed surfaces. However, if we take a careful look at the high polished flanks, we can spot some macro inconsistencies. Also, the transition between the flanks and the back of the case has somewhat sharp corners. It is my job as a reviewer, of course, to point this out. However, is it a deal breaker and is it important on a watch at this price point? Well, in my humble opinion, definitely not. What I think is important though is water resistance, and Corgeut managed to declare 100 meters of water resistance on this watch, which makes this, of course, a very practical timepiece, even suitable for swimming. We have a flat sapphire crystal here. The crystal sits ever so slightly proud of the fixed bezel, which should provide an additional protection for the bezel from scratches. I couldn't find any mention of anti-reflective coating in the listing, however, the legibility of this watch is pretty good. Movement. In regards to the movement, this is one of the highlights of this watch, and yes, we have more than one highlight here, and the next one is coming when we're gonna look at the bracelet. So, this is of course an automatic mechanical Seiko NH34 GMT caliber. This is my fourth, or is it fifth watch this year with this movement, and I suspect there will be more to come. It is based on the proven and reliable Seiko NH35 movement. It beats at 21,600 vibrations per hour, has 41 hours of power reserve, and of course has a collar GMT function, where we can advance the GMT hand by 1 hour increment to track the second time zone. This movement would be one of the main reasons to buy this watch in the first place, because other watches that feature the same movement are on average at least twice more expensive than this one. So yes, from this perspective, this watch is a bit of a bargain. Dial. Okay. No prices for originality, however, we have a nice and clean execution here. We have a printed minute chaptering and applied hour indices, which are filled with lume. I like the black framing of the hour indices and hands. It makes this already quite legible dial very easy to read. We have new Corgeut branding printed under the 12 o'clock marker and a simple 4 lines of text above the 6 o'clock. I like the splash of orange on the dial text. I think it works well with the orange GMT hand. We have a familiar Mercedes hour hand and a lollipop second hand. Hands are filled with lume. We have a date complication here with the date window cut out at 3 o'clock position. The date cyclop magnification is good, about 2 or maybe 2.5 times. There are some slight inconsistencies in lume application on the hour markers, however, I saw similar inconsistencies on more expensive watches, and this is only visible under magnification. Now, testing the lume, and yes, looks like another cost-cutting area for Corgeut. Lume is there and it will cover you in a pinch when transitioning from a light area to a dark one, but don't expect it to break any records, that's for sure. So, something to keep in mind. Corgeut delivered quite a decent bracelet on this watch, actually better than I expected. We have solid end links, the integration with the case is very decent, we have very similar finish on the lugs and on the links, and the links curvature is almost flush with the case lugs. Moving further down, we have a nicely finished solid links with brushed top and mirror polished sides. I like a fully brushed approach, it definitely helps to mask any scratches and scuffs. The links are held together by screws, which is also good, definitely not a very common feature on under $90 watches. Okay, if we are to get down to nitty-gritty of it, the bracelet tolerances are not as tight as, let's say, on a $200 or $300 watches from AliExpress that I tested before, so there is a bit of additional play and flexibility. However, in general, the bracelet build quality is very decent, especially taking into account the price point of this watch. Looking at the clasp, and here we've got a bit of a pleasant surprise, that's another highlight that I mentioned earlier. We have a fully milled clasp here, and I definitely didn't expect to see an on-the-fly adjustment on this $83 watch. It wasn't clear from product pictures, so the on-the-fly adjustment does come as a nice bonus. And the clasp quality is actually pretty good. The tolerances are nice and tight, there is very little side play, which in my experience is the common issue on this type of clasps. The on-the-fly adjustment works well too. Initially I was a bit alarmed by too much flexibility when I moved the adjustment around, however, once it's locked in place, it stays in place. And I didn't experience any issues with on-the-fly adjustment over the few days that I was testing this watch. Of course, I cannot vouch for a long-term use, but so far it performed well. The fully milled clasp is finished similarly to the rest of the bracelet, and the operation is nice and tactile. Here is this watch on my about 7-inch wrist. It sits nice and flat and well balanced, and the curve and links help with the fit. And here for reference, this watch on a 6¼ wrist. As you can see, it kind of just about works, but for the wrists slimmer than that, we possibly will need to move to the strap. Well, the good news is that I didn't find anything that I would classify as ugly and what would be a deal breaker for me on this $83 watch. So let me get bad kind of things out of the way first. I kinda covered them already, but to recap, low performing lume, possibly not the highest quality of finishing, not that I would expect it to be on a watch priced well under $100. Also, it would be nice to see some more branding other than on a dial, like maybe signed crown or a clasp. Another point, just before I started editing and after I tested the crystal, which definitely is sapphire, I also decided to test the Cyclop, and the reading wasn't as definite as it was on crystal. The scale on the tester did move 2 steps, which is higher than I normally get on the mineral glass, however, it wasn't convincing enough, so the Cyclop is possibly made of hardlex, so something to keep in mind. As for positives, well, where do I start? Okay, obviously Corgeut gets no points for originality here, however, they managed to put together a really good package. Japanese NH34 movement, full stainless steel construction, sapphire crystal, mostly, good bracelet with very decent clasp with working on-the-fly adjustment, all for under $85. What are your thoughts? Please do let us know in the comments. And if you find this review helpful, don't forget to do all those important things like smash that like button, subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, thank you for watching, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.